Hi, welcome to Hamilton and Hazen, Behind the Mic. Join author M.L. Hamilton and me, I'm narrator Kelley Hazen, as we discuss our latest audiobook. Born from our 7 years of collaboration and more than 60 audiobooks we've produced together, listen to the ins, the outs, the ups, and the downs, the inside track you love to follow, Behind the Mic.
Welcome to Behind the Mic number 14. Today, Kelley and I are going to be talking about All Hallows, our latest joint venture that we're hoping will come out any day now.
Someday.
All Hallows has been a challenge. It's been delayed on coming out in ebook and print, and it's been delayed now in the audiobook. And so we'll get there. We know we're within days of it coming out. But the first thing we both had decided we wanted to talk about was all of the lineup that we have coming out pretty quick here within probably days. You and I decided we were going to release some very clamored after box sets that people have been waiting on, our listeners have been waiting for. And so we're releasing, we just released the Moonlight trilogy, which went live at the middle of October.
I think even more recently than that. I think it's just been like maybe a week. It was sometime this week.
Yeah.
Today's November 12th, right? So it was sometime in the last like 5 or 6 days.
Yeah. So we released the Moonlight trilogy. We have All Hallows coming. We will.
So instead of murder for Halloween, we'll be having murder for Thanksgiving.
That's right. We have the second volume of the Peyton Brooks FBI coming out, and that will be books 6 through 11.
Yeah, we thought we wouldn't do that till the first of the year, and we both got so much feedback that our listeners were hot for another Peyton besides the Peyton FBI. That I think it's cool that we moved this up. I think it's a good thing.
And then we have the second box set, volume 2 of The World of Samar, which will be sorry, the Star of Eldon, the Scions of Eldon, no, the Spirit of Eldon, right? Yeah, and the Sanctuary of Eldon. And so that's coming out. And then we will have some point in December our second installation in the Christmas Mysteries, Finding Freedom, will be coming out. So we have a whole bunch of stuff coming out for your road trips, your holiday road trips, or your holiday relaxation while you're cooking in the kitchen or whatever you choose to do, wrapping presents, for you guys to show our gratitude, because we are so grateful. We realize we have this, we're so fortunate, right, to have this core of listeners that are there for us for everything that we release. So this is our way of kind of giving you guys enough stuff to keep you going through the holidays and share our gratitude with you
And saying thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So let's talk a little bit about the second. So this is the second of the early cases for Peyton. This is All Hallows. It follows A Sour Grape, which came out last year in September or October, I believe. And this is the second installation, and we just finished it. And like we said, we're waiting on it to be released. All Hallows had a very Halloween theme, obviously, by the name, and it was set around Halloween. And there were a couple things that kind of came up during the production of it. You had mentioned in one of your status updates that Marco doesn't like, which he says repeatedly in the book, he doesn't like Halloween. And he especially doesn't like it because it's an opportunity for people to don a mask and behave outside their normal behavior. And in your status update, you talked about how timely that is, because we know, nowadays there's so many trolls on the internet who hide behind that mask, that anonymity that they feel that they have on the internet, and they act out. And we know that it's had real consequences in the country. We're just seeing the results of Twitter with this whole authentication thing where they removed the actual authentication part of it. You could pay to have the blue check mark. And so people are creating these accounts that are, they say are authentic to political figures or to companies, and then they're doing, you know, terrible things with it. So we see this kind of happening in real time, with people hiding behind a virtual mask and getting away with things that they probably shouldn't be getting away with. And it came up in the book. So I'm going to let you talk to that, because you had some insights on that whole idea of hiding behind the mask. And
Oh, I just loved the um yeah, I when I have uh well, part of it was so you wrote it that Marco comes up with the allusion to Lord of the Flies
right.
and what to the little boys when they're stranded on the desert island with no, no boundaries, and the masks that they don in order to shed the societal rules and mores that they've been living under. And so part of it was just really funny because Marco's probably the last person you would expect to make a literary connection to his police work, and so that was just that scene is particularly charming. I just really enjoyed it, and that actually is one of the things I love about the early cases is that um, the way that you have, and I don't know, I mean, we saw this a little bit in Potrero Hill, and then Painted Lady, which of course in chronology precedes Potrero Hill, but was actually written well after Potrero Hill. You've given yourself the challenge, or slash you've naturally um evolved into this, or deconstructed into the deconstruction of Marco and Peyton's relationship. And you're seeing these as a reader or listener, or me, the narrator, I'm getting to see their relationship blossom. And of course, their relationship as partners, their professional relationship comes first. And that's that's part of the way that they tease each other, the way they poke fun at each other, and then the way also that they support one another in the early days. Really, it's fun. It's just fun to discover that, making that discovery, plumbing that mystery, as well as, then the mystery of whatever crime has been committed. Yeah, so it was just right around the same time that I recorded that portion about the connection to Lord of the Flies. I had gone to pull an image off the internet. I had done a search for an image, and all of a sudden I was getting um within that image search, which had nothing to do with it was images of San Francisco, because that was another thing I really loved about All Hallows, is that you picked really wonderful, spooky, eerie San Francisco locations. And so I was looking for pictures of those for my progress reports, and all of a sudden these images would come up that of automatic weapons, and sort of going toward that political unrest direction that
Yeah.
had nothing to do with my search.
Hmm.
And which is not exactly the same thing as wearing a mask, but it is this, when people don't know who we are, how do we allow ourselves to behave? You know, y- who's the boss of me?
You think that there's no consequence, right? When you think that there's no consequence of your actions, and in all hollows, this becomes significant because they're very mindful that they need to solve this murder before people go back to their normal lives and they take off the masks. And how do you find people that are anonymous? How do you find people who, came into a crowd, something happens and they're all in mass and nobody knows who, anybody is, right? Because they're all taking on a different persona. And of course, there's the overlying thing of it being Halloween and of us always, to me, Halloween is such an interesting holiday because it's an opportunity to step outside of who you are. It's not about being a child either. It's adults who don a costume, that step outside of who they are and take on this new persona. And maybe it gives them, it's like the purge, right? It gives them the
It gives one permission, you
permission,
know.
yeah, to do things that you would normally not do, right? Because you're pretending to be somebody different.
Did you get trick-or-treaters at your house?
I did. We had a very weird night that night. So um my car had broken down, and so we were waiting for my son had come from San Francisco, and we were waiting for the tow truck to come. And so we were sitting on the driveway because we couldn't lock the car, and we knew people were going to be coming by, and we couldn't lock the car because the car had the battery had died, and so the car was completely just dead in the water, but we couldn't lock the car, and I didn't want the car vandalized, so we're literally sitting in the cold on the driveway as the trick-or-treaters were coming up. And it was an interesting experience because they would come up and they were the ones in mask, but they would be startled by us being sitting on the driveway, and they'd kind of shy off at first. And then I had the puppy out there and I had the candy, and then they would come up and they would get the candy. But at first it was this weird thing because my son and I weren't in costume, but the people that were in costume were like shying off at the fact that we were sitting on the driveway, and we were just there not to be weird, but because we were waiting for the tow truck driver and we were worried about, people coming by with the car open. So
Yeah.
it was an interesting experience that night because yeah, it was just different. Did you get trick-or-treaters?
We did, and we've had several years where we either didn't get any or we'd only get one or two, and it was really fun, and I wore like a partial costume. Because it's funny, I used to hate costume parties. I just hated them. I thought they were stupid. I didn't want anything to do with it. And I think I might have even talked about this last year. Then Bruce and I went to one year, and it was the year that the X-Files was so huge. And so we went as Mulder and Scully,
Yeah.
and you know, and we had like I had on a trench coat and he had on a suit, and we had earpieces in our ears, and we had badges, FBI badges, and every now and then we'd be talking to people in a group, and I'd go, "Oh, excuse me," and then I decide, and it was so much fun, and it was that thing of being somebody else in the party situation where probably I get very shy. I just, and the result of that is that I feel like I have to be the life of the party, and but being able to be that other character, that other person, it was very protective. It was very comforting, but this Halloween, yeah, we got a bunch, and it was interesting watching the kids because I make them say trick or treat. They can't just walk up to that. And they were so sweet. They were so polite and very proud of their costumes. I would ask them who they were, and most of them looked like they were homemade, and they asked how many pieces of candy they could have. And, it was really nice. I mean, I really took heart in it.
It was very nice, and it was very nice to get back to some sense of normalcy and see kids being kids,
Yeah.
and I've always loved having the kids come to the house, and I even like when the teenagers come because it's like for a while you're being a kid again, it's kind of nice to see them, but yeah, so and we had quite a few. We usually do, but then last year I didn't even open the door because I was too afraid
Uh,
because of the
yeah.
pandemic. So it was nice to get back to that sense of normalcy and to see kind of the life come back into the neighborhood,
Yeah,
which,
I agree.
which kind of segues into our next topic. And it was you mentioned on the flip side of coming back to normal life is there's a funeral scene in this book, and you mentioned that it was somewhat triggering when you were doing it. So
It was funny, just, we do these behind the mics and sometimes it's probably been a month since we finished work on All Hallows, and sometimes it can be, I take notes. I mean, I keep notes when I'm recording and I write the progress reports and um but stuff bubbles up now that we're talking about it again. And I know that All Hallows surprised both of us, I think. And it's interesting because that's becoming a theme in our work. Um, you felt the same way about the Scions of Eldon. Um, you hadn't read it in a while, and Sanctuary was such a big book in terms of where the series went. And Scion sort of was this sleeper as we got deeper and deeper into it. And All Hallows was the same way. It's like we thought, oh, it's just another early case. Or not just another early case, but it's going to be about the facts. It's going to be just the facts, ma'am, all this stuff. And then this was, so the whole early cases, and correct me if I'm wrong here, because certainly you're the expert in this department. This is not long after Peyton's father dies in the line of duty, right? Where the early cases begin. Yeah. And obviously it's about murder, because murder in San Francisco, that's what these early stories with Peyton in the early cases, not only the early cases, but the early books of Peyton Brooks are about. And so Peyton attends a funeral in All Hallows. And the morning of the day that I recorded that particular chapter, I attended online the memorial service of a friend of mine whose parents, they lived very far apart. She had a very checkered relationship with her parents throughout. She's only child. Not dissimilarly. My relationship with my mom and my dad were challenging. I lost my mom a year ago. My dad had died several years before that, but in both those cases, my folks had been divorced for years, like I was 6. And so there were those separate but parallel relationships that I have navigated my whole life. And it was really interesting because my friend, her parents had said they did not want a memorial. And so she clearly was having this memorial, which was at a cathedral, but did not have an audience. It was just the participants in the service, and everyone else attended online, basically. And she had decided to do this memorial service for her own, out of her own need to make sense of their passing and find closure, which caused me, after it was beautiful service, beautiful music, excellent choices of passages read and scripture. And knowing her as I do, it was interesting to almost watch her in the moment come to terms. And it was coming to terms not only with the part of it that she could control to find comfort and closure, but also coming to terms with the part of it that she would never find closure for. And it caused me to remember my own feelings a year ago. And you and I talked about this a lot, actually, because I record a Christmas story every year.
Right.
My mom died just a day or two before Thanksgiving, and I actually chose the Christmas story that I recorded. It was something I'd always been wanting to record. It was something that totally resonated for me on the way I had always felt at the holidays as a child growing up, which was a very, push me, pull you type of experience. And the intro to the Christmas story that I recorded turned out to be very personal and very much a memorial to my parents.
Right.
Even though what it actually memorialized was my inability to find closure and to know what to feel. All of that came up attending my friend's memorial service online the day I was going to record the funeral service in All Hallows. And And for Peyton, in that scene, all of this stuff is coming up that she has or has not been able to deal with in terms of the loss of her father. And when I say has or has not been able to deal with, I don't mean had the time. I mean, in her own search
Yeah.
to understand her feelings about her father's passing. And it wound up being not only for me in performance, because, I can only perform what you write on the page. I mean, at the end of the day, if it's not on the page, it's really hard for me. And it's also not authentic. It's not organic, and it doesn't serve my role as your narrator to give you something you didn't write, right? So, that being neither here nor there, that scene that scene goes to a place that's far beyond just the facts, ma'am.
Yeah.
And enhanced by the universe setting me up, with that memorial service on that particular day. But it's a very it was very powerful for me to record, and I can only hope that my experience personally enhances it for the listeners as opposed to getting in the way of it for the listeners. So we'll see.
Yeah. It was, well, it's such an interesting, right? It's such an interesting idea, I mean, coming on Halloween, obviously, Dia de los Muertos, you've got that whole idea of honoring those that have gone, and this idea that you were talking about of your friend, even though her parents said they didn't want a memorial, her making the decision that for her, she needed that.
I
Uh,
think I think that's a decision that all of us who come after
yeah,
have to make about what the role of that. I mean, my sisters and I went back and forth regarding my father's memorial, and is it for them or is it for us? Is it for the dead or is it for the living?
what I've always said, when I think about funerals and I think about memorials and I think about, um a lot of times now they're called celebrations of life, right? And we've kind of changed that. We've tried to change that paradigm. Um, I don't think it's about the person who's died. I absolutely do not think it's about the person who's died. I think it's about the people that are left and coming to grips with that loss, that monumental loss. And I I do think, there's definitely room to keep in mind the desires of the person who is gone, but I also think in some retrospect, maybe the person who is leaving needs to realize that the person that they're leaving behind also has a need to grieve in their way. And I think we do public grieving because it's universal, right? I mean, everybody
Mhm.
suffers loss. Everybody is going to attend a funeral. Everybody is going to lose people that mean the world to them. And how do we do that? And I think we publicly grieve because it's one of those things that makes us most human.
Well,
It's,
you know what Chris says, love them while they're alive.
yeah, yeah. Um, it codifies, for us what that person meant.
It can. I mean, I do think a lot of it, well, yeah. I mean, however we do it, there's a bill to pay,
Yeah.
you know. The bill's gonna come, and I don't think anybody's ever ready for it. I
No,
don't know if there's a formula
no.
to prepare. I mean, I was gonna say, has someone written a book on how to grieve or how to
Lots of books on how to grieve, but it's an individual thing, right? You mentioned Peyton coming to grips in these first few months with her father being dead, but she really doesn't come to grips with it even in the present. She's still, years later, I think in the future ones, it's still a raw open wound for her.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, grief is we just did I teach journalism class, and we did our magazine. We do a magazine twice a year, and we have a thematically based magazine the first half of the year, and it was on loss, and it was on all the different levels of loss, and these kids, these students of mine have experienced an unbelievable monumental amount of loss. They've experienced personal loss, they've experienced loss of their childhood, they've experienced so much loss of their innocence. And so we focused on that. And I think it's such a timely topic. I mean, loss is always there, but this seems like a time in history where the loss is been bigger.
Did you choose that topic, or did you and the students pick it together, or how do you come up with the theme?
Yeah, we picked it together. Usually they come up with something, and they came up with this one. This was their idea, and there were so many things to fit under that umbrella. Even down to the loss of faith in our democracy, right? I mean, we've all been experiencing that lately, and um I think the world is grieving. There's a level of grief. You can't go through what we went through during the pandemic and not have monumental amounts of grief. And how we come through it, I don't know that any of us know, right? I don't think that we
Well, yeah. And to have gone through the pandemic together and to come out on the other side of it in a situation like January 6th is, I mean, yeah,
I think
how division, how does something that could have, should have brought us together,
Mhm.
and yet we somehow, so yeah, no, I know exactly. I think that's extremely poignant what you have just offered.
it's an interesting time we're living in, and we were talking earlier about literature being a vehicle to, maybe we don't always want to, maybe we don't, we want to shy away from it, but it's facing that, like you having to face that realization that you faced by having to record, right? I mean, it's your job is as an audiobook narrator. That doesn't mean that you can divorce it from you as the human who feels and experiences. And it's that how do we face it? How do we, going back to our mask idea, how do we take the mask off and be real and authentic in expressing our grief? And if literature lets us, if that's the vehicle that lets us, whether it's pleasant or not, at least it's something, right? It's some way to grapple with this enormity of this idea of loss and grief and death. I don't know.
Well, that's where art and literature, to be sure, but art overall,
Mhm,
um, becomes essential,
mhm.
and I'm always so proud um, of the government in California. I mean, there's a lot of things, you could say a lot of things. And I grew up in Missouri, and I have some friends there, and they go, "Well, it's a little too blue for me." But um, there was on the Los Angeles, and I think it was a state proposal, but it could have been local, to ensure, I don't know if it was constitutionally or in the charter in the city, to ensure that music and art remain in the schools. It was a like a proposal to ensure that they will always be in the schools. And I mean, that without that outlet to both experience and to create, we cut off an amazing part of our humanity and our education that we're giving ourselves and our children without it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I was very pleased to vote for that proposal. And I haven't checked because, everybody's waiting to see what happened in the midterms, but I don't know if that proposal passed. And this conversation actually will inspire me to go find out if it did.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I love what we do, and I'm very proud of what we do, and I'm so honored by the response we get from our listeners. And our new award we just got for the Scions of Eldon, which, like you mentioned earlier, was our sleeper. And I was a little worried. I wasn't sure.
It's pretty exciting when you think about and Zion's is not included in that box set that's coming out, but of the last 3 audiobooks in the World of Samar series, the audiobookraviewer.com has given the last 3 books their Reviewer's Choice Award, which they award to books that have exceeded that deserve recognition beyond the highest of 5 stars for books that have gone above and beyond. And I mean, I'm humbled, I'm grateful, I'm so delighted because I am such a fan of that series. And we all put our heart and souls into it. And it's really great when it receives that kind of recognition. And we're watching that series pick up steam and people becoming more and more excited about it. And it's going to be really exciting to release this box set and watch that fan base grow even more, because it's great stories that deserve to be told, told and heard.
It's it's been like you said, I love the idea of humbling, and that's why when we talked about going forward, because we had spaced out the release of these box sets, we had thought we would space them out, and then when you and I talked, we were like, let's just go ahead and let's get them all out there so people have access to it. And so
I'm in that place. I mean, it's like I was raised as a kid to like save things for good. You'd get an outfit and it was like, oh, you can't wear that. You have to save it for good. And it's like all of a sudden, and maybe it's the pandemic, maybe it's political unrest, who knows what it is. I'm not saving anything anymore. It's like if I find something, it's like, I'm going to use it. I'm going to wear it. I'm going to give it. I'm going to, yeah. And it just, that was totally in keeping with that vibe that I'm feeling and that clearly you're feeling too. It's like, let's just give it. Let's just.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's not restrict access. Let's let people binge to their heart's content, right? Yeah. So let's update people going forward, because we're coming up on a new year and a whole new slate of titles. So we have Finding Freedom hopefully coming out. Well, we know it will be out in December. And that's a new book. And then we'll be back with Zion, which we keep teasing Zion, and we shipped some stuff to hit some dates that we needed to hit, but Zion is definitely the next on our list that we're gonna do. Mint Mocha Chip. And then a really exciting one is the new Peyton series. Yeah, the hate crimes division will be starting in 2023. And so
do you anticipate Mint Mocha Chip in 2022 or 2023, or is it up in the air right now?
It's up in the air right now. It's going to depend on, how fast I can get Finding Freedom done. But it will be if not in 2022, it'll be early in 2023, because we need a new Zion. I have a fan who she loves Zion, and so she told me today, she sent me a message today saying that her husband's building her a shelf just to hold her Zions. So it was like, we need a new Zion out, so we'll get on that.
I kind of love how we're finding more and more that people are reading the book and then listening to the audiobook, or listening to the audio and then going back. They're starting to combine the experiences. And it's like, that is so cool. That is so exciting.
It is, yeah, it really is. It's super special. So anything else for our fans, our listeners?
Just they're on my gratitude list for this Thanksgiving, and so are you. And I'm just glad to be alive and happy Thanksgiving. This will probably be, yeah, this might, our next Behind the Mic will be for Finding Freedom, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So happy Thanksgiving, and just stay safe and, love the one you're with.
Yeah. Happy Thanksgiving, and may all our listeners have a wonderful time with their families, and take a moment to think about all the things that are good and wonderful. Like,
Yeah,
these.
we've got a lot to be grateful for.
Yeah. All right, Kelley. Well, thank you so much. And we will see you guys again for our edition on Finding Freedom.
Thank you for joining us for Hamilton and Hazen Behind the Mic. Visit authormlhamilton.net and kelleyhazennarrates.com to join our newsletters for more insider news and views. Today's episode is sponsored by Phoenix Publication Services, PPS, Digital Shepherds. Let us ignite your writing goals.